The rain began before sunrise, soft at first, then heavy enough to turn the narrow village road into a ribbon of mud. Inside the small clay house at the edge of the fields, Elena sat awake beside the stove, staring at the empty doorway. Her husband was gone. Not for work, not for a few days. Gone for good. He had left before dawn with a single bag, his motorcycle, and a sentence that still echoed through her chest like thunder. You can keep the children in that broken clay house. The villagers repeated those words for weeks, some with pity, some with laughter, because everyone in the valley knew the house was worthless. The roof leaked every spring. The walls cracked every winter, and the land behind it was dry enough to kill almost anything planted there. At least, that was what people believed. Elena looked at her 2 children sleeping under patched blankets. 8-year-old Misha curled beside his little sister Sophia, who still held a wooden toy horse in her hand, even while sleeping. For one dangerous moment, Elena felt fear take hold of her, not fear of poverty. She already knew poverty, not fear of loneliness. She had lived beside a cold husband for years. No, she feared becoming invisible. In the village, abandoned women slowly disappeared, first from conversations, then from invitations, then from respect itself. People stopped seeing them as people. They became warnings. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. Elena stood quietly and walked to the cracked mirror hanging near the stove. She studied her tired face, her rough hands, the dark circles under her eyes. Then she whispered something unexpected. Fine. That was all. No tears, no screaming, just one word. But something changed in her eyes after she said it. Something sharp, something awake. The next morning, the village already knew. Old women whispered near the well. Men smoking outside the grain store shook their heads. Teenagers laughed openly when Elena passed carrying buckets of water. She'll leave by winter. She can't survive alone. That house will collapse before the snow comes. Elena said nothing. She simply kept walking. The clay house stood on the farthest edge of the village near a dead orchard nobody wanted anymore. Years ago, the orchard had produced sweet apricots famous across the region. Then disease spread through the trees. One by one, they stopped bearing fruit. People said the land had become cursed. Her husband believed it too. That was why he had been willing to leave it behind. But on the 3rd night after he disappeared, Elena noticed something strange. The old dog sleeping outside began growling toward the orchard. Not barking, growling, low and nervous. Elena wrapped herself in a coat and stepped outside holding a lantern. Wind pushed through the dry branches overhead. The orchard looked like a cemetery of twisted trees under the moonlight. Then she saw movement. Someone was there, a figure standing near the far fence. Tall, still, watching. Elena froze. The lantern trembled slightly in her hand. "Who's there?" she called. No answer. The figure disappeared behind the trees. Her heart pounded hard enough to hurt. Most people would have gone back inside. Elena walked forward instead, step by step through wet grass. Toward the orchard, everyone feared. The moon slipped from behind the clouds for one brief second and illuminated something strange nailed to one of the dead trees. A symbol, burned into wood. Fresh. Elena touched it carefully. It looked almost like an old family mark, but she didn't recognize it. Behind her, a branch cracked. She spun around quickly. Nobody, only darkness. She returned to the house uneasy, locking the door carefully behind her. That night she barely slept. And just before sunrise, someone knocked on the door. 3 slow knocks. Elena opened it carefully. A black truck stood outside, not from the village. A man in a gray coat stepped out holding papers in his hand. He looked expensive, city expensive, clean shoes, gold watch, sharp eyes. "Are you Elena Voren?" he asked. "Yes." He glanced at the clay house with visible confusion, then at the orchard, then back at her. "I've been searching for this property for 6 months." Elena frowned. "You have the wrong address." "No," the man replied quietly. "I definitely don't." Rain dripped from the roof between them. The children watched silently from inside. The man opened a leather folder. "What I'm about to say may sound unbelievable," he said, but your land may be worth more than the entire village combined." Elena stared at him, then laughed once, a tired, bitter laugh. "This land can barely grow potatoes." The man didn't smile. "That's not what interests us." Us. That word immediately made Elena cautious. "Who are you?" she asked. The man hesitated, then handed her a business card. "North Star Geological Group." Elena looked confused. "A geological company?" The man nodded slowly. 3 months ago, satellite scans revealed unusual mineral activity beneath this region. Elena blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said carefully, "someone made a very expensive mistake by abandoning this house." At that exact moment, another vehicle approached through the mud road. Fast. Too fast. A motorcycle. Elena's expression changed instantly because she recognized it. Her husband. He stopped hard near the gate, breathing heavily, panic visible on his face. But he wasn't alone. 2 strangers climbed off a second vehicle behind him. Men Elena had never seen before. And for the first time since leaving, her husband looked afraid. Very afraid. He stared at the man from the geological company, then at Elena, then at the orchard. "You talked to them already?" he asked nervously. Elena narrowed her eyes. "What is going on?" Her husband swallowed hard. But before he could answer, one of the strangers stepped forward and said something that made the entire morning suddenly feel dangerous. "She deserves to know what's buried under that orchard." Elena's blood ran cold, because the stranger didn't sound greedy. He sounded terrified. And deep beneath the cracked earth of the abandoned orchard, something had awakened. The wind carried silence across the yard. Nobody moved. Elena stood between the clay house and the men staring at each other like enemies who had arrived too late. Her husband avoided her eyes completely. That hurt more than his return, because guilt was written all over his face. The stranger who had spoken stepped closer to the orchard fence. He looked older than the others, with silver hair and rough hands scarred by years of labor. "Tell her the truth," he said coldly. Elena's husband shook his head immediately. "No, you already took the money." "I said no." "Money." Elena felt something twist inside her chest. "What money?" she asked sharply. Nobody answered. The man from North Star Geological Group opened his folder again. This property became important after underground scans detected rare mineral concentrations beneath the orchard. He explained carefully. "Very rare." "How rare?" Elena asked. The businessman hesitated. "Enough to attract investors from 3 countries." Her husband cursed quietly under his breath. Elena stared at him. "You knew?" Still no answer. The older stranger finally spoke again. "He found out 2 months ago." Elena felt the air leave her lungs. 2 months. That meant her husband had already known before abandoning them, before leaving the children, before calling the house worthless. "You left us on purpose," she whispered. Her husband finally looked at her. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Those words only made things worse. Elena stepped backward slowly as realization spread through her mind like fire. He hadn't abandoned the clay house because it had no value. He abandoned it because he believed he could return later and take it back once the land deal was finished. But something had gone wrong. Something serious. The older stranger removed a folded document from his coat pocket. "Your husband signed an agreement with dangerous people," he said. "I didn't have a choice," the husband snapped. "You always had a choice." The tension between them felt old, personal. Elena crossed her arms tightly against the cold. What dangerous people? Nobody answered immediately. That silence frightened her more than words. Finally, the businessman spoke quietly. "Several private groups are competing for control of the land. Not all of them operate legally." The children watched from the doorway, without understanding. Little Sophia hugged her brother's arm tightly. Elena noticed and lowered her voice. "What exactly is under the orchard?" The older man looked toward the dead trees. Then he said something unexpected. "Not gold." That answer confused her. "Then what?" He inhaled slowly. "Lithium." The word meant almost nothing to Elena, but it clearly meant everything to the others. The businessman immediately became cautious. You shouldn't discuss details publicly. The older man ignored him. Lithium changes everything now, he continued. Electric batteries, technology, energy systems. Countries are fighting over it. Elena blinked. Under her orchard? Impossible. This broken land where nothing grew? The businessman nodded, as if reading her thoughts. The scan suggests one of the largest untouched deposits in the region. Elena suddenly remembered the strange symbol burned into the tree, and the figure watching the orchard at night. Someone else already knew. Her husband stepped closer urgently. Elena, listen to me carefully. You need to sell the land immediately. No. His expression darkened. You don't understand what's happening. Then explain it. He rubbed his face nervously. I borrowed money. The older stranger laughed bitterly. That's one way to say it. Her husband pointed angrily at him. You stayed quiet too, because I warned you not to trust them. Trust them? Elena's stomach tightened. How much money? She asked. Her husband looked away. A lot. How much? He finally answered. 200,000. Elena nearly lost balance. That amount was unimaginable in their village. What did you do with it? I invested. The older stranger muttered, gambled. Her husband slammed a fist against the truck. I was trying to give us a better life. And instead you sold your family to criminals, the older man replied. Silence fell again. Then came the sound of another engine approaching. Everyone turned. A black SUV rolled slowly toward the property. Too clean for village roads. Too expensive. The businessman from North Star Geological Group suddenly looked uncomfortable. Damn, he whispered. The SUV stopped near the orchard. Two men stepped out wearing dark coats despite the rain. Neither smiled. One carried an umbrella. The other carried nothing at all, yet somehow looked more dangerous. Elena immediately noticed something terrifying. Her husband took a step backward when he saw them. Fear, real fear. The taller man approached calmly. Good morning, he said politely. Nobody answered. His eyes moved directly to Elena. You must be the owner. I live here, she replied cautiously. That's even better. The man smiled faintly, but his eyes stayed cold. My employers would like to purchase your property today. No, Elena answered instantly. The man didn't react. Instead, he removed a folded paper from his pocket. A generous offer. She didn't take it. How did you find this place? We find many things. The older stranger quietly moved closer to Elena's side. Protective. The dangerous man noticed immediately. So you told her already, he said. No, thanks to you, the older man replied. The dangerous man sighed softly. This situation becomes harder when emotions get involved. Elena's patience snapped. Enough talking. Tell me what's happening. For the first time, the man's expression hardened. Your husband borrowed money from people who expected repayment after the land transfer. Elena looked at her husband in disbelief. You used this house as collateral? He said nothing. That silence answered everything. Her hands began trembling, not from fear, from rage. The dangerous man continued calmly. But now the ownership situation has become complicated. Complicated? Elena repeated. Yes, because legally, the property belongs to you. Her husband suddenly shouted. It was supposed to transfer after the divorce. The children froze at the word. Divorce. Little Sophia began crying quietly near the doorway. Elena turned toward her daughter instantly, and something inside her changed completely. Until now, she had been shocked. Now she became dangerous. She walked slowly toward her husband. Rain dripped from her hair and sleeves. You planned all of this before leaving us? Elena, you promised the children you would come back. I was trying to fix things. You sold our future. Her voice remained calm. That scared her more than screaming would have. The dangerous man interrupted carefully. We can still resolve this peacefully. Elena turned toward him. No. The single word stunned everyone. You haven't even heard the offer. I don't care. The businessman from North Star Geological Group watched silently with growing interest, because suddenly, the frightened village woman everyone expected collapse wasn't collapsing at all. She stood straighter now, stronger, like someone finally seeing the truth clearly for the first time. The dangerous man studied her carefully, then smiled slightly. You remind me of your grandfather. Elena froze. My grandfather? You didn't know? A strange silence followed. Even the older stranger looked surprised. The dangerous man glanced toward the orchard. This land belonged to him long before the village existed. Elena's heartbeat quickened. Her grandfather had died before she was born. Almost nobody spoke about him anymore. What does that have to do with anything? The man's smile disappeared. Everything. Then he pointed toward the dead orchard. Your grandfather knew what was beneath those trees. The world suddenly felt smaller, colder, more dangerous. Elena stared at the orchard as rain fell harder across the broken branches. All these years, people believed the land was cursed. But what if the orchard had never died naturally? What if someone wanted the land forgotten? The dangerous man stepped closer and lowered his voice. Your grandfather refused to sell. Elena swallowed slowly. What happened to him? Nobody answered, and that silence frightened her more than anything yet. The rain stopped just before sunset. Dark clouds drifted slowly beyond the hills, while the village whispered itself into madness. By evening, everyone had heard different versions of the story. Some claimed Elena had become rich overnight. Others said armed men were fighting over her land. A few believed treasure had been discovered beneath the orchard, but the oldest villagers stayed strangely quiet, especially when Elena's grandfather was mentioned. Inside the clay house, the stove crackled softly while Sophia slept beside it wrapped in blankets. Misha sat near the window, watching the orchard nervously. "Mom," he whispered, "are those men coming back?" Elena looked toward the dark trees outside. "Yes," she answered honestly. "Are we in danger?" She paused, then sat beside him. Maybe. Children usually expected comforting lies from adults, but Misha had seen too much already. So Elena told him the truth instead. "But danger doesn't mean we run." The boy studied her face carefully. "You're different now." Elena almost smiled. Maybe she was. Earlier that day, after the strangers left, she had searched through old wooden boxes stored beneath the stairs. Most contained useless things forgotten by time. Broken dishes, winter clothes, photographs fading at the corners. Then she found something wrapped carefully in cloth. A journal, old leather, heavy, dust-covered. Her grandfather's name was burned into the front. Elena opened it with trembling hands. Inside were maps, numbers, strange notes about the orchard, and one sentence repeated again and again across multiple pages. They must never control the land. Not sell, not protect. Control. Elena didn't fully understand yet, but she understood enough to feel afraid. A sudden knock shook the door. 3 hard knocks. Misha stood instantly. Elena motioned for him to stay back. When she opened the door, she found the older stranger standing alone beneath the fading evening sky. "I came to warn you," he said quietly. She led him inside. The man removed his wet coat, slowly while studying the small clay house. His eyes lingered on old photographs hanging near the stove. "You look like your grandfather," he said finally. "You knew him?" The stranger nodded. "My name is Pavel. Pavel Anton." He sat heavily near the fire, as though carrying years of exhaustion inside him. "I worked with your grandfather long ago," he continued, "before everything went wrong." Elena placed a journal on the table immediately. Pavel's face changed the moment he saw it. "You found it? You knew about this?" "Yes." Elena leaned forward. "Then tell me the truth." Pavel stayed silent for several seconds. Then he finally began. 30 years ago, survey teams discovered lithium beneath these hills. At the time, almost nobody cared. The technology world hadn't exploded yet. He pointed toward the orchard. But your grandfather understood the future before everyone else. Elena listened carefully. He believed whoever controlled the lithium would eventually control entire regions, economies, governments, energy. The fire crackled softly between them. "So why hide it?" Elena asked. Pavel's expression darkened. "Because powerful men arrived. He explained how companies, politicians, and criminal investors quietly competed for land ownership across nearby regions decades earlier. Some farmers sold immediately. Others disappeared after refusing. Elena felt cold despite the warmth of the fire. My grandfather refused to? Pavel nodded slowly. He said the land should never belong to people driven only by greed. Elena remembered the burn symbol on the tree. What about the mark in the orchard? Pavel looked surprised. You saw it? Yes. He became visibly uneasy. That means they're searching again. Who? Pavel hesitated, then answered carefully. A private group connected to the original investors. Elena's stomach tightened. How dangerous are they? Instead of answering directly, Pavel pulled up his sleeve. A long scar across his forearm. Dangerous enough. Silence filled the room. Outside, wind moved through the dead orchard branches with a sound almost like whispering voices. Then Elena asked a question haunting her since morning. How did my grandfather die? Pavel looked away. The official story said heart failure. Official story. Elena immediately understood. You don't believe it. No. The room suddenly felt smaller. Pavel leaned closer. Your grandfather discovered something else before his death. Elena frowned. What? Pavel tapped the journal carefully. There's another deposit. Her eyes widened. Another one? Much larger. The air seemed to disappear from the room. Bigger than the orchard? Impossible. Pavel nodded slowly. And according to your grandfather's notes, only one person knew the exact location. Elena whispered, him. Pavel looked directly into her eyes. No. He pointed toward the journal again. You. A sharp chill ran through her body. That makes no sense. Your grandfather had the final map before he died. Elena shook her head immediately. I never met him. You didn't need to. Pavel carefully opened the journal to the final pages. Most looked blank, until he held them near the firelight. Slowly, faded lines began appearing across the paper. Invisible ink. Elena stared in disbelief. There, hidden beneath years of dust and time, was a hand-drawn map, and written beneath it were 6 words that changed everything. For Elena, when the wolves returned, her breathing stopped. He had known her name. Decades ago, before she was even born. Suddenly, headlights flashed outside the house. Bright, too bright. Pavel stood instantly. They found us. Voices echoed outside. Several vehicles. Doors slamming. Men approaching. Misha grabbed his sister protectively near the stove. Elena's pulse hammered inside her ears. Pavel moved toward the window carefully and cursed under his breath. How many? Elena whispered. Too many. A voice called from outside. Mrs. Voren, we only want to talk. The dangerous man from earlier. Elena felt fear rising again. But beneath the fear, something stronger had begun growing. Anger. Years of silence. Years of humiliation. Years of surviving beside a husband who saw her as weak. Gone. She looked at her children, then at her grandfather's journal, then toward the orchard beyond the darkness. The village believed she was abandoned, broken, finished. But outside her tiny clay house stood wealthy men, investors, criminals, and strangers powerful enough to terrify entire regions. And all of them wanted something that belonged to her. The knocking came again, harder this time. Pavel whispered urgently, Do not trust them. Elena nodded slowly. Then she did something nobody expected. She opened the door herself. Cold night air rushed inside immediately. 5 men stood outside beneath bright headlights. The dangerous man smiled politely again. Mrs. Voren, he said calmly, have you reconsidered our offer? Elena stepped onto the porch, barefoot against the cold wood. The men behind him looked confident, certain they would eventually pressure her into surrendering. After all, she was only a poor woman living in a cracked clay house. What resistance could she possibly offer? Elena folded her arms and looked directly at the dangerous man. Then she spoke words that would spread through the entire region by morning. If my grandfather died protecting this land, her voice remained steady, then maybe you should be afraid of the granddaughter he left behind. Silence. Real silence. Even the wind seemed to stop. The dangerous man's smile faded for the first time, because suddenly the woman standing before him no longer looked abandoned at all. She looked ready for war.